We begin here with Russia launching a large-scale attack across Kyiv that lasted nearly 10 hours, one of the longest of the year. Ukrainian officials say at least 2 people were killed and dozens were injured. Now, they also say the strikes knocked out heat to thousands of buildings in freezing temperatures. Russia's attack comes just a day before Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to meet with President Trump in Florida. The two leaders plan to discuss the 20-point peace plan that Ukraine unveiled this week following discussions with the U.S. Now, we have full coverage for you. We have CNN senior White House reporter Kevin Liptak. He's near Mar-a-Lago, and correspondent Nada Bashir in London. Kevin, I want to go to you first. Tell us, what do we know about this 20-point plan that's on the table for these talks?
Yeah, and this is essentially Zelensky's version of the multi-point plan that President Trump had put forward. You see the two sides kind of going back and forth, trying to come up with something that they can agree on. And what Zelensky's plan includes is immediate ceasefire. Of course, that has been his prerequisite for trying to get this war to an end. A legally binding agreement. It includes provisions that sort of mandate Ukraine's sovereignty. It talks about security guarantees that the U.S. and Europe would provide to ensure that Russia doesn't invade further once this war ends. And it includes some discussion of the territorial concessions. Now, when we talked to American officials a couple weeks ago, they said that they were about 90% there on this peace proposal. But of course, that 10% that is remaining is a difficult one, and it is a sticking point. And it's what the president will discuss when Zelensky comes down here to Palm Beach tomorrow. You know, this meeting kind of came up last minute, and it's, I think, significant. You know, it wasn't that long ago that President Trump said that he didn't think it would be useful for him to sit down with Zelensky unless he felt they were closer to reaching a peace agreement. And there has been significant work put in to try and get there, including down here in South Florida. The president's envoys, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, meeting with a Ukrainian delegation. They met with an envoy from Moscow to try and get all of this put together. You know, President Trump, in an interview yesterday, was somewhat tepid about his expectations for this meeting with Zelensky, saying that he doesn't have anything until I approve it, referring to that peace plan, and we'll see what he's got. But he also says that he thinks it's going to be a good discussion, which in the end has not always been the case. You'll remember back in February, that explosive Oval Office discussion between the two presidents. And so quite a critical meeting, I think, set to take place here on Sunday. What isn't going to happen, of course, is any agreement from Moscow, because Vladimir Putin is not coming to Florida. He will not be over at Mar-a-Lago. And I think it still remains something of an outstanding question of what precisely Vladimir Putin is willing to agree to. So far, Russia has not backed off any of its maximalist demands for how this war will end, including that Ukraine give up the entire Donbass region. What Zelensky has said is that he's willing to put this peace plan up for a referendum in Ukraine, but only if Russia agrees to stop the fighting. And so all of this remains uncertain, but clearly an important moment for the men to discuss all of it. Danny.
Yeah, an incredibly important moment indeed. I want to bring Nada into the conversation. Can you give us a little bit of perspective from Ukraine? Is Kyiv beginning to recover from this latest attack?
Well, look, this has certainly been one of the largest aerial assaults that we have seen in recent days, if not recent weeks, targeting the Ukrainian capital. And we've been getting video from the ground showing the sheer scale of the destruction that has been brought not only to Ukraine's energy infrastructure, but also to civilian infrastructure. A number of residential buildings were hit in this overnight assault. And we've heard earlier in the day from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who said that Russia launched nearly 500 drones and some 40 missiles at Ukraine in this overnight assault, which lasted some 10 hours, making it one of the longest that we have seen in the last year. So you can imagine the horror and devastation for many in Kyiv, who have not only had to see this overnight attack taking place today, but also over the last few days. We have seen a ramping up of Russia's assault on Ukraine ahead of the Christmas period. Take a listen to one resident of Kyiv who was impacted in today's attack.
All night long there was an air raid siren, and then in the morning we heard a very loud explosion at the thermal power plant. Then we heard when the drones flew in and there was an explosion and flames broke out. The house shook. We went to the window even though you shouldn't. We got dressed, ran out of the house and heard a man burning on the fourth floor, begging for help. It's horrible.
Now, at this stage, officials say at least one person has been killed in that attack, dozens injured, and this has certainly only ramped up the pressure and urgency that President Zelensky is facing in securing some sort of peace deal and backing not only from the United States, but also, of course, from NATO and European leaders as well. Danny?
All right, a very consequential post-Christmas weekend on this front. Nada Bashir and Kevin Liptak, thank you both so much for that reporting.
Well, let's get analysis now from CNN political and national security analyst David Sanger. David, good to have you here with us, and thank you for taking the time. Let's just start with those strikes first in international relations in Kyiv. Is Moscow signaling more escalation, or is this leverage ahead of these talks between Zelensky and Trump?
Well, good to be with you, Brad. Mostly it's about leverage. I mean, Vladimir Putin probably sincerely believes the time is on his side. He has taken out a good amount of Ukraine's ability to produce heat during the winter. I think he thinks he can weaken the will of the population and freeze a lot of people out. President Trump keeps insisting that Putin is ready for peace. I don't see anybody who actually believes that Putin has shown any indication along those lines. He has every interest in taking this quite interesting 20-point proposal that President Zelensky will be discussing with President Trump and sort of dragging out the discussion of the details through the winter for advantage.
President Trump said in an interview with Politico that Zelensky, quote, doesn't have anything until I approve it. What do you think that he is likely to press Zelensky on during these discussions?
So there are two open areas still in those 20 points where the U.S. and Ukraine have not yet come to a full agreement. One is giving up territory in Donetsk, which is the province that's most contested right now, and where President Trump would like Ukraine to give up territory that the Russians haven't even been able to manage to take, and it's somewhat strategic territory. President Zelensky's idea here is to get a ceasefire and then take this to a referendum of the Ukrainian people, which would, of course, lift the political pressure off of him for making a decision to give up national territory. The second area of disagreement is over who administers the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant and who actually gets the electricity from that plant. And there are two different proposals around. I think that one's resolvable. But the issue of territory is going to be one that I think could prove pretty contentious tomorrow.